Hey you guys, Irene Lyon here. Welcome to this video, welcome to this YouTube channel. Thanks for being here. I wanted to do a little introduction. I was just outside for a walk here in my hometown of Vancouver, BC, because I did a Facebook Live a few weeks back in my Healthy Nervous System Revolution Facebook group. Be sure to join it if you haven't yet. And what I talked about was this paradigm shift that I believe we need to embrace so that we can really start healing our bodies and becoming our own medicine. And the question or my response, my commentary was prompted because I'm always getting questions asking me things like, does your work help with this ailment or this disease or this issue? And what do you think of this modality or this therapy? And they're all valid questions, as I mentioned in this video, and there's a little more to it. So have a listen, have a watch. And I also talk about soul and the importance of soul and why we need to do some ground level work first so that we can work with our soul effectively. Take good care, enjoy. One of the questions that came in, there's a lot, but the first thing that's really important to understand when we're doing this work is that it's not a quick fix. It takes time, it takes education, it takes work, it takes commitment, it takes practice, it takes knowing how to sequence the healing so that you can get the benefit of what we call your neuroplasticity. And it isn't something, excuse me, that's talked about very much. And a lot of the techniques, a lot of the practices, even talk therapy and various body therapies and emotional therapies, they still miss the mark when it comes to getting into the stress physiology of the body and really working with it from literally the ground up and all the in-betweens. I'm going to read a quote. It's from Gabor Maté. If you know who he is sort of a pioneer in understanding the connection of the mind, the body, and the environment. And someone had a question earlier about the soul, and do I work with the soul? And you might be surprised on my answer on that, so stick around for me to answer that, because here's what Gabor says, and then I'm going to wrap that up a little bit. So he says, awareness also means learning what the signs of stress are in our own bodies, right? So if you're watching this, take your hands and just bring your hands to your body and be like, this is me, this is my body, right? And there's so much in the body, not just the brain, not just the emotions, not just our physical and structural, everything. Cells, fluid, lymph, muscles, vessels, just lots of stuff in our body, and everything around us impacts us, right? So we're not like, we are organic substance, and we respond to that which is around us, and we put out energy to that which is around us as well. So he says, awareness means learning what the signs of stress are in our own bodies, how our own bodies telegraph us when our minds have missed the cues. I'm going to say that again. How our bodies telegraph us, like literally send us a telegram, when our mind has missed the cues. Okay? In both human and animal studies, it has been observed that the physiological stress response, so like how we adrenalize and pump out cortisol and go into fight or flight or freeze. So it has been observed, I'm reading a quote still, that the physiological stress response is a more accurate gauge of the organism's real experience than either conscious awareness or observed behavior. That's really important. There's like, you could write an essay or a book just on that quote. Maybe I will one day. But we always, when we're seeing problems creep up in our system, in our psyche, in our digestion, in our relationships, we tend to focus on changing the behavior, or we tend to change the thinking, right? Change the thoughts, change the mind, change that consciousness, or do things, change just the way we might interact with someone through behavior. But that stuff is all secondary to the physiology. We are governed by our biology. So if we have trapped trauma, trapped stress that is in our nervous system and it impacts everything inside, we basically, with all the conscious thought and all the really good behavior modifications, that underlying stress physiology still runs the front of the bus. All right, so it's really important, I believe, and I look at some of the questions here. A lot of people are asking about how does my work mesh with Dr. Sarno's work? What about EFT? What about TRE, which is trauma release exercises? I'm reading questions from earlier today. What about fibromyalgia? What about a child of mine that's in a freeze response? Right? There's so many questions. And when I read the questions, they're really good questions, because for so many of us, we're still in a very linear cause and effect paradigm. So I'm starting to look more clearly at this entire paradigm of how we've looked at health, which is to separate problems and try to fix them, or try to change behavior because the behavior is off. And here's the thing. When it comes to methods, all methods have a time and a place, okay? But if that person doing that method, whether it's tapping or whether it's mindfulness, positive thinking, mantras, whether it's massage, whether it's TRE, which a lot of people ask, which is trauma release, if that person doesn't have the skill set, the language to listen to their stress physiology, that quote I just quoted from Gabor Maté, if that person can't tune into what's going on internally and then redirect and understand how to work with their internal environment, those methods fall short, right? So this is why some people will say, I had wonders and EFT healed this, or EMDR healed that, or TRE healed this. I have no doubt that there are a subset of people that actually get really better with these, I would call them more management style techniques that go in specifically. But there's a very large subset of people, and I know a lot of you in the group have these conundrums where you've tried all these things and they've helped a little bit, but at the root, your digestion is still off. You still get panic. You still can't sleep. There's still chronic pain floating around. If I didn't already say digestion, immune system issues. And so we want to teach a person how to get this language of their nervous system back on board, and it's not easy. In other words, it can happen. I've seen it happen with my clients and those that I work with, but it's not a quick fix, and it's not something that can be done really kind of in a matter of, okay, we're done in 3 months or we're done in 12 sessions. And this is where it can be really tricky, because many want that answer, right? How many sessions do you think this is going to take? And the moment someone comes to me, I'm just being really honest here, the moment someone comes to me with that framework, I kind of take a step back and I go, okay, it's time to educate and shift the paradigm so that we're not seeing the healing as an end result, right? It's not just going to all of a sudden be miraculously better. So we have to shift that paradigm. And then if they're interested in shifting that paradigm, then we have to start, as I call it, learning the language of the nervous system. So for all of you who have questions around specific therapies, I think they're really good questions. And I have to also insert the reason why I'm here, the reason why we're in this group, is I want to offer a different viewpoint, a different vantage into this thing that is the human organism, and into this thing that is illness and chronic illness and trauma and post-traumatic stress and complex post-traumatic stress and mental illness. all the things that us humans are having to learn to heal and cope with and manage, right? One of the reasons why I love Gabor Maté is he talks about you cannot just look at the person's symptom and fix it with a drug. Maybe you might have to. Let's say you have a bacterial infection, right, because of a cut that got infected. By all means, go get some antibiotics, right? That kind of thing. There's a time and a place for certain modalities, and it's really important, I believe, to create agency in yourself to understand the differences, right? When you should maybe go to the doctor because maybe it is an infection versus a virus, versus you're feeling a little malaise after a session because there's a piece of trauma working through. To know the differences takes practice, and we've kind of bleached ourselves out of this internal organismic organic intelligence, as one of my teachers, Steve Hoskinson, would say. He's all about organic intelligence, and I think he's quite right to call it organic intelligence. We've just gotten so far away from organic intelligence that we're like, you know, I'm doing this gesture, we're like trying to scrape up a wall to find whatever we can get for a quick fix. And then a person falls short because they might do it a little bit, it changes, and then they're left back to where they were at the beginning. So thank you guys for chiming in here. Kenda, you ask, how does the enteric, so the enteric system is basically the digestive nervous system. It's part of the parasympathetic. How does that and the microbiome fit? It all fits in, right? So there's many people who, let's say, have digestive troubles or brain issues, and we're actually now getting to this point, and I think it's really sad, where companies are trying to like bottle bacteria, you know, like what you would get in yogurt or sauerkraut or apple cider vinegar, right? This is why kombucha has become so crazy. We can feed ourselves really good bacteria, but here's the thing. If your stress physiology, if your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the enteric nervous system, if it is not healthy because of stored traumatic stress and no connection to it organically from your brain system and body system, you can feed your system all the bacteria in the world, and it might give it a boost in that moment, but if that underlying foundation doesn't get built up again and the trauma released and regulation of the nervous system come back on board, which takes time, which takes practice, which takes commitment, that feeding of the bacteria won't actually fix the root issue to why that gut is off in the first place. Time and time again, many of my students have come to me with superb diets and they're still really sick, they're still really anxious, they still have mental processing disorders isn't the right word, but let's say anxiety, depressions, kind of fatigue, malaise, and they work on the nervous system, learning the language, learning how to regulate it, learning how to listen to that stress chemistry and physiology that Maté talks about, and then in this almost gentle, in some ways miraculous way, all the systems of the body in little tiny bits start to improve. The gut starts to improve, the clarity in the mind starts to improve, pain starts to shift, all these little things start to change. So this is the paradigm shift. I'm trying to do this with my hand. There's no proper way to describe this. And we really want to see how we can become masters of our own internal physiology. I just saw a comment come in, can trauma get trapped in your solar plexus? Again, this is a good question, Helen, and trauma can get trapped in your elbow. It can get trapped in your throat. It can get trapped in your eyes. It can get trapped in the gut, in the bladder, in the joints of the knees. It can be anywhere. It could be in our memories, right? So if someone has a tightness in an area like the solar plexus, they have trouble speaking, they have trouble with their urinary areas, their reproductive organs, right? movement, all of it is one big soup. And each person will be individual in how they work with that and how they might choose to work with a practitioner who is trained to help them relearn the language of the nervous system, right? So this is a big part of the work that I do with people online, and I refer people in this group to my colleagues such that they can start to see the body in a much more holistic way. There was a really good question that someone asked about the soul and how does the soul fit into the nervous system. And there was this thought that I might not believe in that or work with it, and that is not true. I actually, one of my favorite mentors, and he's a dear friend, we did an interview together. His name's Chris Durkees. If you're interested in learning more about the ins and outs of meditation and mindfulness, and when a person should use those practices and not, please listen to the interview. If you just pop into Google, IRENE LYON, Chris Durkees, you'll find our interview on YouTube. He is an ex-priest. He is a spirituality guy. He's a soul interpreter. I call him sort of a soul master. He works with that, and it's something that I've been playing with more. But here's the thing that we talk about. Here's the kind of the Coles Notes version of that interview that we did, and something that I'm getting more interested in as I age, as I get older. We need to work on, I believe, the higher realms, right? I believe in past lives. I believe in things out in the system that we can't see or touch. I believe in energy. I believe in distant prayer. I believe in telepathy. I believe in a lot of things that I don't speak about because I want to keep this group around the nervous system. But what often happens is that people try to go into those realms too soon. They work with energy and light and these bigger elements that we would call, if we really talk about it, that are in the fourth and the fifth dimensions. Earth is the third dimension if we get into this idea of dimensions on the planet. It's the solid, it's the stuff that we can touch, it's the nervous system, it's the body, right? It's our practicality, it's our creations. Whereas the fourth dimension is this ability for us to put intention into our body and heal it. This is what my students learn and are learning right now in my 12-week program. We work at putting our visualization and our intention and good, positive, I call it juju and juice and energy and goodness to parts of the body. We specifically work with the gut and the kidneys and the adrenals and the brainstem, the joints, the diaphragms. But if someone's having, say, trouble in the solar plexus or somewhere else, I just say to them, take the template and the ideas you've learned when we've studied and worked with visualizing and intending and putting intention and attention to the kidneys, right? Because the kidneys and adrenals, those are the powerhouses of our stress response. So when someone has high stress physiology, we want to direct our intention, our visualization to that organ. So the moment we start to play and dabble with that, we're dabbling with these, what we would call the fourth dimensions, right? To the third, to the physical. And it works. We know this from intention, right? Shifting our energy. If you've ever been thinking about someone over and over again one day, and then all of a sudden out of the blue they call you and you haven't heard from them in weeks, it's that output of energy, of thought, of imagery, if you will, the idea of that person that literally reaches them through this world that is filled with electricity and energy. And what I'm seeing happens is when we get into the third dimension, into the body system, work at the level of the stress physiology, and for lack of a better word, clean it up, right? Make it healthier, get rid of the junk that's sort of, you know, has a mask on us, or has, like, we have blinders on, or there's like this sludge or this kind of grayness that kind of fogs us up, you know, if we can clean that up and get all of those old imprints, all of the conditioning, if we can start to see our systems as these complex systems that are more than just the physical, that also intentionally work with everything around us, right? If we can clean that system up, we then have better superpowers, if you will, to connect. The other thing that's really cool is that when we work at raising the level of our nervous system health, we are better. One question that we get a lot is how can a person who's very empathetic and feels energy shield themselves from all the negative stuff that's going around? The way you do that is you become more regulated in your nervous system. The more, again, words don't do this justice, but the more pure, the more regulated, the more healthy a person is, and they're not being driven by their stress physiology, the more they will be able to filter the toxic crap that's coming at them from people, the world, the news. And right now we really need that. We really need to know how to filter that stuff out, but not block ourselves off. Because a lot of people who are thinking that they're filtering and protecting themselves are actually shutting themselves down more, right? So we want to regulate this nervous system, connect to the body level, and then know that as we put good intention through this practice to ourselves and to others, right? People kind of throw out that idea of love and light. I think that's fine, but we have to know why we're putting it out. Who are we putting it to? And if we're putting it out there, is our system regulated enough to even put that out there, right? Or is it just in the thinking? If we're putting out that energy just through the thought, it's not getting to where it needs to go. It has to be embodied. The soul is important, and we need to work with the soul in conjunction with the body, and preferably we work with the body first, the nervous system, to literally, like I said, clean it out, get it healthier, get rid of all the old cobwebs and all those things that are keeping us, you know, people will talk about high frequency, low frequency. That stuff's real, right? So when we're at this lower frequency of working in the system, we struggle to put our intention where it needs to go. And then we struggle at knowing who is safe, who isn't safe, that kind of thing. So this capacity for us to see and to feel this nervous system, not as this like black and white lump of nerves that's just the brain and the spinal cord, but this web, if you will, of nerves that touches everything internally, and then has the capacity to literally reach out and touch others, not like through some weird tentacle, but energetically, such that we can put good intention out there that isn't just thought-based, right? I'm a science girl, but I am also a really big spiritual girl. And I'm going to end with a quote, because I started studying this back in 1999, before I even got into neuroplasticity, before I got into Feldenkrais, before I got into somatic experiencing. It's a quote from Einstein, who I'm going to assume most people know who he was, right? He was a physicist, he was a scholar, he was a big thinker, he was an innovator, he was a heretic. And he said in one of his books, and he's quoting someone, he says, "A contemporary has said, not unjustly, that in this materialistic age of ours, the serious scientific workers are the only profoundly religious people," right? Only the serious scientific workers are the profoundly religious people. Now, the word religion, to me, that's probably something that we could replace right now in the current time zone that we're in humanity. That means spiritual, soul, right? So those that study deep science, quantum physics, like he did, they get that it's all connected, all of it, right? And we have to see when we're working at this level, when you're asking the questions, I have this problem, how can I fix it? flip it, flip that paradigm and kind of stand back and listen to the whole system as opposed to that one area that's niggling you. Unless, of course, you really have an area that just got hurt, like a cut or a broken bone, right? Or you just had food poisoning and your guts are not feeling good, right? You have to be smart about this. You have to try to sense and understand the bigger picture when you need to, but then also maybe more the local picture when it is something more specific and it is something that needs direct attention. That makes sense? I'll post some of those things that I linked up or that I mentioned, the interview with Chris, the quote from Gabor Maté. I'll put in that Einstein quote, and we will talk to you later.